My son postponed introducing me to his fiancée 11 times. Not 10, 11. At first, I didn't think much of it. People are busy. Schedules don't always line up. Then Thanksgiving came. She's visiting her aunt. Christmas. We're spending it with her family this year. New Year's. We'll do dinner in January. January became February. February became April. By summer, they had already booked a wedding venue. Yet I still hadn't met the woman my only son was going to marry. After the 11th excuse, I stopped asking. My name is David Harper. I'm 62 years old. I spent 34 years with the FBI investigating financial crimes. Most people imagine high-speed car chases, explosions, shootouts. My career looked nothing like that. I followed paper, bank transfers, tax records, wire fraud, shell companies. The people I arrested usually wore tailored suits instead of ski masks. When I retired 4 years ago, I thought I'd finally left that world behind. My wife, Linda, never got to see retirement with me. Cancer took her 18 months before I turned in my badge. After she died, Noah became the only family I had left. He was 31 now, an architect, smart, kind, the sort of man who still called every Sunday, even when life got busy. We'd always been close. That's why his excuses bothered me. They didn't sound like Noah. One Sunday afternoon, while we were eating lunch at my favorite diner, I finally asked again, "So, when do I finally get to meet her?" He smiled. "Soon." I've heard soon. For almost a year. I know. You'll like her. I'd like the chance to find out. He stared into his coffee. She's just nervous. Nervous about what? He shrugged. Meeting my dad. I laughed. I spent my whole career interviewing criminals. I'm not exactly intimidating anymore. He smiled politely. But it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind people give when they're trying to end a conversation. We talked about baseball, work, the weather, everything except Emily. That was her name. Emily Lawson. I knew exactly 3 things about her. She taught children's art classes. She loved hiking. And somehow, meeting me had become the most difficult appointment on her calendar. 2 weeks later, Noah invited me to his apartment. I need help moving a bookshelf. When I arrived, he wasn't home yet. He texted that traffic had delayed him by 20 minutes. His building manager recognized me. "You can wait upstairs if you'd like." I let myself into the apartment using the spare key Noah kept hidden above the doorframe. The place looked exactly the way I remembered. Books everywhere. Blueprints covering the dining table. Coffee cups that should have been washed 2 days earlier. As I waited, I wandered toward the bookshelf he'd mentioned. That's when I noticed a framed photograph lying face down on the floor beside a box. Probably knocked over while they were rearranging furniture. Without thinking, I picked it up. It was their engagement picture. Noah stood smiling beside a beautiful young woman with dark hair. Between them stood an older man. Gray suit, silver hair. One hand resting proudly on his daughter's shoulder. The moment I saw his face, every sound in the room disappeared. My hands stopped moving. My heart felt strangely heavy. 23 years had passed. His hair had turned gray. His face had aged, but I knew him immediately. Some faces never leave you, especially when you've spent 3 years building the case that sent them to prison. I whispered his name before I even realized I was speaking. Thomas Lawson. The photograph slipped slightly in my hands. Noah walked through the apartment door at that exact moment. He saw the picture. Then he saw my face, and the color drained completely from his own. Neither of us said a word, because we both knew everything had just changed. Noah didn't say a word for several seconds. He simply looked at the photograph in my hands, then quietly closed the apartment door behind him. "I was hoping you'd never see that." I kept staring at the older man in the picture. "Thomas Lawson." Noah slowly nodded. "So you know who he is?" "I know exactly who he is." The room suddenly felt much smaller. I carefully placed the photograph back on the shelf. "Tell me I'm wrong." "I can't." I turned toward him. "You're marrying his daughter?" "Yes." "Does she know who I am?" He hesitated. "She knows your name. Does she know what I used to do?" Another pause. "No." I felt something tighten in my chest. "So that's why." "No, don't lie to me." "I'm not. You've been hiding her from me for almost a year." "I've been trying to protect everyone." "Protect who?" "You." I almost laughed. "I'm 62 years old, Noah. I don't need protecting." "You don't understand." "Then help me." He rubbed both hands across his face. "You remember the Lawson case. I'll remember it until the day I die. 23 years earlier, it had been one of the biggest financial fraud investigations in Ohio. Hundreds of victims, retirement accounts wiped out, college savings gone, entire families ruined. It had taken my team almost 3 years to untangle the money trail. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, fake investment firms. Thomas Lawson had been the public face of the company. Confident, charismatic, the kind of man people trusted within 5 minutes of meeting him. The jury needed less than 4 hours to convict him. 22 years in federal prison. I remembered every detail, especially the last day in court. As marshals led him away in handcuffs, he looked directly at me. Not the prosecutor, not the judge, me. "You think you won." Those were the first words he'd said. Then he'd smiled. A strange smile. Not angry, not frightened, almost sad. "My daughter will grow up believing one man destroyed our family." At the time, I hadn't answered. I'd heard every threat imaginable during my career. I thought those words were just another one. Now they echoed in my head differently. I looked back at Noah. "How long have you known who I was to her family?" "Almost from the beginning." "And Emily?" He looked away. "She knows her father went to prison." I assumed that. "She believes he was framed." I stared at him. "What?" "That's what he told her." "Noah, there were 4,000 pages of evidence." "I know. 47 witnesses." "I know. The man stole millions." "I know." He raised his voice for the first time. "I know." Silence filled the apartment. A moment later he spoke much more quietly. "But she doesn't." I sat down slowly. For the first time since finding the photograph, I wasn't angry anymore. I was confused. "So she's believed that story her whole life." He nodded. "Her mother believed it too." "And now?" "Her mother passed away 6 years ago. So all she has left is her father." Noah sat across from me. "I wanted you two to meet. I really did." "Then why didn't we?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "Because every time I got close, I imagined the moment she'd discover the truth." I didn't answer. He continued. "What happens after that?" "I don't know. She hates you." "I don't care if she hates me." "I do." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He took a long breath. "Because if she finds out from anyone except her father, she'll spend the rest of her life believing both families lied to her." Those words stayed in my mind long after I left his apartment. That evening, I pulled an old storage box from the closet. Inside were dozens of files from my career. Awards, newspaper clippings, retirement plaques. At the very bottom, I found the Lawson case. A thick gray binder covered in dust. The evidence, the witness statements, the photographs. Everything exactly as I remembered. Then something slipped from between the pages and landed on the floor. It was a newspaper clipping I'd completely forgotten about. The headline wasn't about Thomas Lawson. It was about a little girl. "Fraud suspect's daughter bullied after father's arrest." Below the headline was a photograph. A frightened 8-year-old girl leaving school with her mother. Children stood behind them pointing, laughing. One of them held a homemade sign. "Thief's daughter." I stared at the picture for a very long time. That little girl was Emily. And for the first time I realized something I had never once considered in 23 years. Thomas Lawson had deserved his sentence. His daughter hadn't. That photograph stayed on my desk for 3 days. I must have looked at it 50 times. An 8-year-old girl, head down, holding her mother's hand, surrounded by classmates who blamed her for something she had never done. I'd spent my career telling victims that justice mattered. Looking at that picture, I realized justice and fairness weren't always the same thing. On Thursday morning, I did something I hadn't done since retiring. I drove to the federal courthouse. The building hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same security checkpoint, same smell of old paper and coffee. A few people still recognized me. One retired prosecutor even smiled. "David Harper, didn't expect to see you back." "Neither did I. I need access to an old case." He laughed. "Only you would spend retirement reading court files." I guess old habits die hard. An hour later, I sat alone in the archives. The Lawson case filled 4 storage boxes. Every financial record, every interview, every search warrant. I wasn't looking for evidence. I'd already known the evidence by heart. I was looking for something else. Double loss. Looking for evidence. I'd already known the evidence by heart. I was looking for something else. Thomas Lawson himself. People aren't only their crimes. Sometimes they're also the things hidden between the paperwork. Near the bottom of the second box, I found a thick folder labeled Family Interviews. I didn't remember reading it in years. The first interview was with Thomas's wife. She described selling jewelry to pay legal fees, moving into a smaller apartment, trying to keep Emily in the same school because she didn't want her daughter to lose her friends too. Then I reached Emily's interview. Age, 8, conducted by a child psychologist, not because she'd committed any crime, because the court wanted to evaluate how the investigation had affected the family. The transcript was only 6 pages long. I read every word. The psychologist asked, "Do you know why your father isn't home?" Emily answered, "They say he stole money." "Do you believe that?" "No." "Why not?" "Because my daddy says good people get blamed sometimes." I turned the page. The psychologist asked, "Are you angry with anyone?" There was a long pause noted in the transcript. Then Emily answered, "Yes." "Who?" "The man who keeps taking my dad away." I stopped reading. I already knew who that man was. Me. For several seconds I simply stared at the paper. To an 8-year-old girl, I hadn't been an FBI agent. I hadn't been someone following evidence. I'd just been the stranger who kept making her father disappear. I quietly closed the folder. As I stood to leave, an elderly woman pushing a records cart stopped beside my table. "You all right?" I looked up. She smiled kindly. "You've been staring at that page for almost 10 minutes. I knew this family." She nodded. "Sometimes the old cases stay with us." She had no idea how right she was. On the drive home, my phone rang. "Noah, hey, you busy?" "Not really." There was hesitation in his voice. "Emily wants to meet you." I nearly pulled the car onto the shoulder. What changed? I didn't tell her. Then why now? Because she keeps asking why I've been avoiding it. So, I can't keep making excuses. When? He took a deep breath. Sunday. Dinner. Just the 4 of us. The 4 of us. Me. Emily. Her father. And you. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Thomas Lawson will be there. Yes. Silence. Finally I asked, "Does he know who I am?" "No." "Are you sure?" "As far as I know." I didn't answer. Noah continued, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't tell Emily." "Not yet. I can't start a relationship with my father-in-law by lying. It isn't about him. It's about her. Please." I looked through the windshield at the long stretch of highway ahead. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't know what the right thing looked like. "I'll come." Relief filled his voice. "Thank you." As I ended the call, another thought entered my mind. If Thomas Lawson truly believed he'd been framed, then Sunday would be uncomfortable. But if he knew exactly what he'd done, then Sunday could become something much worse. Because only one of us was walking into that dinner carrying the truth. And I had a feeling the other one had been hiding from it for more than 20 years. Sunday arrived much faster than I wanted. I must have changed my shirt 3 times before leaving the house. Not because I wanted to make a good impression, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd been nervous to meet anyone. The restaurant overlooked the Scioto River. Quiet. Small. The kind of place where people celebrated anniversaries instead of business deals. I arrived 15 minutes early. Old habit. Noah was already there. The moment he saw me, I knew something was wrong. He wasn't smiling. "You almost left." He nodded. "Twice." "Why didn't you?" "Because eventually someone has to stop running." Neither of us said anything else. A few minutes later, the front door opened. Emily walked in first. She smiled the moment she saw Noah. Then her eyes found me. "So you're finally the famous David." She walked over and hugged me before I even had time to stand. "It is so nice to finally meet you." I was caught completely off guard. No hesitation, no awkwardness, no resentment. She seemed genuinely happy. "I've heard so much about you. I hope only the good parts." She laughed. "Mostly." For the first time in months, I relaxed. Then another man entered behind her. Gray hair, dark blue blazer. Slower than I remembered. Much slower. Thomas Lawson. 23 years had changed him more than prison ever could. He looked thinner, older, almost fragile. Emily smiled. "Dad, this is Noah's father." Thomas looked at me. Our eyes met. For less than a second. Then something changed. His smile disappeared. Not gradually, instantly. He knew. He extended his hand anyway. "David." His voice was calm. "So, it's you." I took his hand. It has been a long time. Neither of us mentioned where we'd last seen each other. Emily looked between us. "You've met before?" Thomas answered before I could. "A lifetime ago." She smiled. What a small world. Neither of us corrected her. Dinner began awkwardly. Emily did most of the talking. She told stories about her students. Noah talked about work. I asked questions. Thomas barely touched his food. Every few minutes I'd catch him looking at me. Not with anger, not with hatred, with something much harder to understand. Almost shame. Halfway through dinner, Emily excused herself. "I'll be right back." She headed toward the restroom. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Thomas quietly placed his fork on the table. Without looking at either me or Noah, he said, "I think it's time." Noah froze. "Please, not here." Thomas slowly shook his head. "It has to happen sometime." He finally looked directly at me. I wondered if we'd ever meet again. I wasn't expecting this. Neither was I. Silence settled over the table. Then Thomas said something I never imagined hearing. "I owe you an apology." I stared at him. "For what?" "For hating you." Noah looked just as surprised as I was. Thomas folded his hands. "For years, I convinced myself you destroyed my life." He gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "It was easier than admitting I'd destroyed it myself." I didn't know what to say. He continued, "I had 22 years to think. That's a long time. I replayed every decision, every lie, every signature, every family that trusted me." His voice became quieter. "I stopped blaming the FBI after about the 10th year." He looked down at the table, "But I never found the courage to tell my daughter." My heart sank. "So she still believes." He nodded. "That I was framed. And you've let her." "I know. Every birthday, every Christmas, every prison visit. I almost told her. But every year, it became harder." Noah spoke for the first time. "She deserves the truth." "I know." Thomas looked at him. "That's exactly why I'm afraid." Just then Emily returned. The conversation stopped immediately. She looked around the table. "You three got awfully quiet." Thomas forced a smile. "We were talking about old times." She laughed. "I hope Dad wasn't embarrassing himself." I glanced at Thomas. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his daughter. The expression on his face wasn't fear. It was heartbreak. As dinner ended, everyone walked toward the parking lot together. Emily and Noah stepped a few feet ahead, laughing about something on Noah's phone. Thomas stopped beside my car. "David." I turned. "I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "If she learns the truth, please, don't let her hear it from a stranger." I frowned. "You want me to tell her?" He slowly shook his head. "No. I want you to give me one chance to do it myself." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small white envelope, then handed it to me. "If I lose my nerve again, give her this." I looked down at the envelope. Across the front, written in neat handwriting, were only 4 words. "For my daughter, Emily." I looked back up. Thomas was already walking away. For the first time in my career, I realized I wasn't holding evidence against a criminal. I was holding a father's last chance to tell the truth. The envelope stayed on my kitchen table for 2 days. I never opened it. It wasn't mine. Every time I walked past it, I heard Thomas's words again. "If I lose my nerve again, give her this." I had spent most of my career believing people rarely changed. The evidence usually proved they didn't. But Thomas Lawson no longer looked like the man I'd arrested 23 years earlier. He looked like someone who had spent 2 decades losing arguments with his own conscience. Wednesday evening, Noah called. "Dad, can we talk?" He came over an hour later. The first thing he noticed was the envelope. "So he gave it to you." I nodded. "You knew?" He told me he was writing it, but he never let anyone read it. Noah sat down across from me. "I don't think he's going to do it." "What makes you say that?" "He canceled dinner with Emily yesterday, said he wasn't feeling well, and today, he stopped answering my calls." I looked toward the envelope again. "He's scared." "I know." Noah leaned forward. "Dad, what was he like?" I frowned. "You mean before prison?" "No, the day you arrested him." That wasn't a question anyone had ever asked me. For a long moment, I searched my memory. He didn't run. What? He could have. We knew later that he'd been warned 6 hours before we arrived. He had enough time to disappear. But he stayed. Why? I never knew. Noah was quiet. Then he asked, "Did he ever deny it?" I thought carefully. During the investigation, Thomas had denied almost everything. But after the verdict, after every witness had testified, after every financial record had been presented, he'd stopped arguing. No appeals claiming innocence. No public interviews. No accusations against the jury. Just silence. He never admitted it. But eventually, he stopped pretending. Noah nodded slowly. "I think that's why he's afraid now." Thursday morning my phone rang. "Emily." I almost didn't answer. "Hi, David." Her voice sounded cheerful. "I hope I'm not bothering you." Not at all. I actually wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. There was a brief pause. My dad seemed different after dinner. I chose my words carefully. Different how? I don't know. Quiet. He kept asking strange questions. What kind? He asked if I'd still love him, if I found out he'd lied to me. My chest tightened. And what did you tell him? I laughed. I thought he was talking about getting older. She laughed softly herself. I told him nothing could ever change the fact that he's my father. I closed my eyes. For several seconds I couldn't speak. David, I'm here. Can I ask you something? Of course. When Dad said he'd met you years ago, what did he mean? There it was. The question Noah had feared. The question Thomas had spent 23 years avoiding. I looked at the envelope, then out the window. Finally I answered. I think that's a conversation your father deserves to have with you himself. She was quiet. Then she smiled through the phone. I had a feeling you'd say that. Before hanging up, she added, would you mind coming over tomorrow night? Why? I'm making dinner. I want the four of us together again. I think Dad needs it. Friday evening, I drove to Thomas's house carrying the unopened envelope in my jacket pocket. It was a modest place. Small porch, neatly trimmed lawn. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that suggested the man who had once controlled millions of dollars. Emily greeted me at the door. I'm so glad you came. She hugged me again. That simple gesture made what I knew feel even heavier. Noah arrived a few minutes later, but Thomas never came downstairs. Emily frowned. That's strange. He said he'd be ready. She walked upstairs. A minute passed. Then another. Suddenly we heard her voice. Dad? No answer. Then louder. Dad! Noah and I ran upstairs. Thomas was sitting in an old armchair beside the bedroom window, fully dressed, hands folded in his lap. The room was silent. Too silent, Emily rushed to him. Dad? He didn't answer. On the small table beside his chair sat a glass of water, his reading glasses, and another envelope. This one had Emily's name written across the front. She looked at me, then at the envelope. I don't understand. Neither did I, until I noticed something underneath it. The envelope I had been carrying already lay on the table. I instinctively reached into my jacket. My pocket was empty. Someone had switched them. Thomas had known I would bring it. He'd been ready. Emily picked up the letter with trembling hands. She looked at me. Should I read it? I slowly nodded. I think it's what he wanted. She carefully unfolded the pages. The very first line made her stop breathing. Emily, the greatest lie I ever told wasn't in a courtroom. It was every time I looked you in the eyes and said I was innocent. Emily lowered the letter after the first sentence. Her hands were shaking. No. She looked at her father as if he might suddenly open his eyes and tell her it was some terrible mistake. He didn't move. Slowly she continued reading. My entire life. I told you one man destroyed our family. I even gave you someone to hate. David Harper. She stopped again. Her eyes slowly turned toward me. For the first time, she understood why Noah had never wanted us to meet. Tears filled her eyes. I lied because I couldn't bear the truth. The FBI didn't destroy my life. The judge didn't destroy my life. David Harper didn't destroy my life. I did. The room was completely silent. Only Emily's quiet breathing broke it. She kept reading. I stole from people who trusted me. Retirees, parents, families saving for college. I convinced myself I'd pay them back. Instead, I kept stealing. I wasn't framed. I wasn't betrayed. I was guilty. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. No, she whispered it to herself, as if saying it quietly enough could somehow make it untrue. The letter continued. The worst crime I ever committed wasn't financial. It was stealing your childhood. I made you carry my shame. I let you believe an honest man was your enemy. I watched you defend me, knowing I didn't deserve it. I am more ashamed of that than prison itself. Emily could barely continue. Tears fell onto the paper. Noah quietly moved beside her, but didn't interrupt. Then came the final page. If David Harper is standing beside you while you read this, please listen to him. He owes you nothing, but he gave thousands of innocent people something I tried to take from them. The truth. If he can forgive me, perhaps one day, you can too. I don't expect it. I haven't earned it. But I love you. I always did. I just wasn't brave enough to tell you who I really was. Love, Dad. Emily slowly folded the letter. No one spoke. Several minutes passed before she finally looked at me. I'm so sorry. I gently shook my head. You don't owe me an apology. I hated you. You hated a story, not me. She wiped away another tear. I spent 23 years believing you ruined my family. I looked toward Thomas. He believed that for a long time, too. No. She quietly shook her head. He didn't. I frowned. What do you mean? She picked up another sheet of paper that had fallen from the envelope. I think he stopped believing it years ago. She handed it to me. It was a copy of a prison counseling report. Near the bottom was one handwritten sentence from Thomas. The hardest part isn't prison, it's knowing my daughter still thinks I'm a good man. The report had been written 14 years earlier. He had wanted to tell her. He simply never found the courage. A week later, we buried Thomas, beside his wife. The funeral was small, just a handful of relatives, a few former neighbors. No speeches, no reporters, no headlines, only a quiet goodbye. After the service, Emily walked over to me. I've been reading the court records. I nodded. I needed to know everything. And she looked out across the cemetery. I kept hoping I'd find one mistake, one piece of evidence that proved he was right. She smiled sadly. I didn't. I found hundreds of victims instead. I didn't know what to say. She continued. I've started writing letters. To who? The families. The ones I can find. I know it won't fix anything, but I don't want my father's last lie to be the only thing they remember. 3 months later, Noah and Emily were married. The wedding was smaller than originally planned. Simple, quiet, beautiful. Before the ceremony began, Noah walked over to me. You know, I almost lost both of you. I smiled. You were trying to protect everyone. I thought if nobody knew, nobody would get hurt. I put a hand on his shoulder. Secrets don't protect families. They only delay the pain. He nodded. I know that now. When the ceremony ended, Emily walked down the aisle holding Noah's hand. Halfway toward the exit, she stopped beside me. Without saying a word, she hugged me. Not because I'd won a case, not because I'd been proven right, but because we had both finally stopped living inside someone else's lie. On the drive home, I thought about something I'd once believed for most of my career. I used to think every investigation ended the day the verdict was read. I was wrong. Some cases don't end in court. They continue inside families, inside children, inside memories, long after the prison sentence is over. Thomas Lawson lost 22 years because of the crimes he committed. His daughter almost lost 23 more because of the lies he told afterward. In the end, it wasn't prison that nearly destroyed his family. It was the truth he waited too long to speak.